The captain stared, not with anger, but with a profound, weary pity. In the mud-churned hell of the Hurtgen forest, where death hissed from every frozen pine, his newest scout, a lanky farm boy from the Ozarks, was pointing toward an impossible target through the swirling fog. The young soldier claimed he could see, nearly 1,000 yards away, the faintest glint of metal and the barest shadow of movement in a distant, fortified farmhouse. He insisted 8 German MG-42 machine gun nests were interlocked there, waiting to shred the next American advance. "You're seeing things, soldier," the captain sighed, his voice barely above the rumble of distant artillery. "That's half a mile through fog and timber. No one can make that shot. Get some rest." He was about to mark the man as battle-fatigued, another casualty of the forest's mind-grinding terror. But the farm boy just quietly loaded a single .30-06 round into his M1D Garand, took a breath that seemed to still the very air around him, and squeezed the trigger. What followed wasn't just a crack of rifle fire. It was the sound of a miracle, a single, precise note that instantly silenced 8 chattering, deadly instruments of war. This is the true story of Private John Jack R. McElroy, the ghost of the Hurtgen, and a shot that military historians still argue should have been impossible. What do you think is the most critical factor for a sniper in extreme conditions? Inhuman eyesight, supernatural patience, or an almost mystical understanding of the wind? Tell us your theory in the comments below before reading the full story. Table of contents. Prologue. The Meat Grinder, Hurtgen Forest, November 1944. The man with the eagle's eyes. Who was Jack McElroy? Tools of the trade. The M1D Garand and the art of the impossible shot. A tapestry of terror. The German defensive fortification. The moment of delusion. The conversation that almost changed history. Anatomy of a miracle. Physics, ballistics, and defying the odds. The ripple of silence. Immediate aftermath and tactical triumph. The ghost's legacy. Sniper doctrine and the birth of a legend. Beyond the scope. The psychological war and the sniper's burden. Epilogue. The fading echo. Recognition, memory, and historical veracity. 1. Prologue. The Meat Grinder, Hurtgen Forest, November 1944. To understand the sheer audacity of McElroy's shot, one must first be immersed in the cauldron that birthed it. The Hurtgen Forest, a 50-square-mile sprawl of dense, dark evergreens east of the Belgian-German border, was never meant to be a major battlefield. Allied planners saw it as a stubborn green blot on the map to be bypassed. But by autumn 1944, with the advance stalling, it became a dire objective. The result was a 6-month nightmare that veterans would later describe as worse than Normandy's Omaha Beach. The forest was a natural fortress, meticulously enhanced by German engineers. Thick fir trees, planted in tight rows by 19th-century Prussian foresters, blocked sunlight and satellite-like observation. The ground was a treacherous mix of mud, icy streams, and dense undergrowth that chewed up vehicles and exhausted men. German defenders of the 275th Infantry Division, and later the fearsome paratroopers of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, transformed this landscape into a killing zone. They sowed tens of thousands of shoe mines, wooden box mines undetectable by metal detectors, strung barbed wire, built reinforced concrete bunkers, Hockerlinien, Dragon's Teeth, and established countless, cunningly camouflaged machine gun positions. These MG-42 nests were the true orchestrators of the slaughter. The MG-42, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw for its terrifying 200-round-per-minute rate of fire, could unleash a hailstorm of bullets that could cut down entire platoons in seconds. Their tactic was brutal efficiency. Let American infantry penetrate a few yards into a clearing or along a firebreak, then open up with interlocking fields of fire from multiple, hidden positions. The sound was unmistakable, a ripping, tearing fabric noise that drowned out screams and orders. It was into this green hell that units like the 28th Infantry Division, the Keystone, were fed. The 28th's patch, a red keystone, was grimly renamed by its wearers as the Bloody Bucket. Casualties were catastrophic, measured not in yards gained but in lives per tree. Morale ground down by constant artillery, tree bursts, shells exploding in the canopy, were particularly horrific, cold, wet, and the invisible, ever-present threat of mines and snipers teetered on the brink. In this environment, where survival was an hourly lottery, a claim of seeing a specific target at 1,000 yards wasn't just ambitious. It sounded like the desperate fantasy of a broken mind. 2. The man with the eagle's eyes. Who was Jack McElroy? John Robert McElroy was not a product of West Point or an elite Ranger battalion. He was a son of the Missouri Ozarks, born in 1922 in the small town of Willow Springs. His childhood was one of poverty and the Great Depression, but also of immense space, silence, and self-reliance. His education in precision began not on a rifle range, but in the woods, hunting squirrel and rabbit for the family pot. A .22 rifle was not a weapon of war, but a tool of sustenance. In these hills, ammunition was precious. Every shot had to count. Missing meant going hungry. This instilled in him an almost spiritual patience, a deep study of animal behavior, wind patterns by watching leaves and grass, and light. He entered the Army in 1942, a raw recruit. His pre-combat file noted exceptional visual acuity during testing, but more importantly, he demonstrated a preternatural calm. He wasn't a boisterous soldier. He was observant, quiet, and methodical. Assigned to the 28th Division, 110th Infantry Regiment, his skills as a marksman were quickly noted, and he was informally attached as a scout sniper, a role that was still poorly defined in the U.S. Army at the time, unlike in the German or Soviet armies. McElroy carried no special issue sniper rifle initially. He used a standard M1 Garand, slightly accurized by unit armorers. His logbook, fragments of which survive in regimental archives, shows meticulous notes not just on distances and hits, but on weather, temperature, wind speed at different tree levels, and even the humidity's effect on his perception of mirage, heat haze. He was, in essence, a self-taught scientist of long-range ballistics, operating with instinct honed by a lifetime of reading landscapes. To his comrades, he was a quiet guardian angel. To his officers, a potent but unpredictable asset. To the Germans in his sector, he was becoming a myth, a ghost that struck without warning. 3. Tools of the trade. The M1D Garand and the art of the impossible shot. The U.S. M1 Garand is rightly famed as the rifle that gave American infantry a firepower advantage. It was semi-automatic, reliable, and powerful, but it was not designed as a dedicated sniper platform. The M1C and M1D were later variants developed to mount telescopic sights. McElroy's rifle was likely an early M1D, fitted with a M84 2.2x telescopic sight. This scope, by modern standards, was rudimentary. Its field of view was narrow, its light-gathering capability poor in the Hurtgen's gloom, and its adjustment clicks were coarse. The cartridge was the .30-06 Springfield, a powerful and effective round. But at 1,000 yards, 914 meters, it was at the very extreme of its effective range. The bullet would be subject to massive drop, over 300 inches or roughly 25 feet, requiring immense holdover. More critically, it would be susceptible to the slightest environmental variables. A 5 miles per hour crosswind would push the 150-grain bullet over 10 feet off course at that distance. Humidity, air density, affected by altitude and temperature, and even the Coriolis effect, minimal but present, became significant factors. For McElroy to make this shot, he had to perform instantaneous, subconscious calculations that modern snipers with laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, and 25x scopes trained for years to accomplish. He had to estimate range precisely, using known size objects, window frames, German helmets, and his profound understanding of perspective in the forest. Calculate holdover, aiming not at the target, but at a point in the sky far above it. Read the wind, judging not just the wind at his position, but the wind lanes between him and the target, how the breeze changed as it flowed through valleys, around hills, and through the dense tree trunks. He would have watched the drift of mist, the sway of moss, and the fall of snowflakes. Execute flawlessly. The surprise break of the trigger, follow-through, and recovery from the Garen's significant recoil had to be perfect. Any flinch would send the bullet yards off target at that range. He was not just shooting at a target. He was conducting a symphony of physics in his mind, with a single irreversible note to play. 4. A tapestry of terror. The German defensive fortification. The target was not a single machine gun, but a coordinated defensive complex centered on a partially ruined stone farmhouse, codenamed Widerstandsnest 72, Resistance Nest 72, and later captured German maps. The Germans were masters of defense in depth. This position was a textbook example. The bait, the forward observer nest a single, visible machine gun in a shallow trench 400 yards out, designed to pin down infantry and draw focus. The kill zone, a 200-yard wide clearing, stripped of cover, raked by pre-sighted mortar and artillery markers. The main event, the farmhouse complex, the stone building, its cellar reinforced with concrete and timber, housed a command post and an ammunition depot. Its upper windows and prepared loopholes housed 2 MG-42s with fields of fire covering the eastern and southern approaches. The flank protectors and log-in-earth bunkers dug into the tree line 50 to 100 yards on either side of the farmhouse were 3 more MG-42 nests on each flank, totaling 6, positioned to create interlocking, murderous lanes of fire across the entire clearing. Any attack on the farmhouse would be hit from 3 sides simultaneously. Supporting elements, hidden mortar pits, and Panzerschreck, anti-tank rocket, teams covered avenues of armor approach. This network was the concrete and steel manifestation of the German tactical doctrine, elastic defense. It was designed to absorb, channel, and annihilate. The buzz of 1 MG-42 was a threat. The synchronized roar of 8 was a guaranteed company-size casualty report. Silence them, and you punched a gaping hole in the local defensive line, opening a corridor for advance. 5. The moment of delusion. The conversation that almost changed history. The scene at the American command post, CP, was one of tense frustration. Captain Henry R. Hank O'Malley, a weary veteran of Sicily and Normandy, was studying a stained map. Reports from patrols had been grim, speaking of heavy fire from the direction of the farmhouse, but no one could pinpoint the sources. The fog and tangled ground made aerial reconnaissance useless. Casualty figures were mounting from seemingly ambushes in that sector. Private McElroy, returning from a 36-hour solo reconnaissance, approached the CP. His uniform was caked in frozen mud, his face pale with exhaustion, but his eyes unsettlingly clear. He saluted and, without preamble, pointed into the fog-shrouded distance. "Sir, the main strong point is in the farmhouse at grid 742. I count 8 MG-42 positions. 2 in the house, 3 in bunkers north, 3 south. They're zeroed on the entire clearing." Captain O'Malley squinted. He saw only a wall of gray trees and mist. 8. McElroy, I can't see the damn house from here. That's 1,000 yards if it's an inch. How can you possibly ID 8 specific guns? I watched their muzzle flashes, sir. Pattern and timing. The fog thinned for about 90 seconds at dawn. I saw the glint of the flanking bunker slots. A skeptical intelligence lieutenant chimed in. "Private, the best scope we have can't resolve that at half that range in this light. Are you sure it wasn't shadows? Or perhaps you're—" He didn't finish, but the implication of battle fatigue hung in the cold air. O'Malley looked at McElroy, the soldier he depended on for clean kills on enemy officers and mortar spotters. He saw not madness, but an unnerving certainty. Yet, the claim defied military logic. Risking a company on a farm boy's hunch was reckless. "Your report is noted, Private. We'll schedule an artillery barrage on that sector tonight." Dismissed. McElroy didn't move. "Sir, with respect, a barrage will just make them duck. They're in deep bunkers. They'll be back up in 10 minutes. If I can get to the knoll at grid 739, I could take the key gun in the house's east window. It might disrupt the whole network. It was the word disrupt that struck O'Malley. Not destroy, disrupt. A psychological insight. He was out of options. The barrage was a palliative, not a cure. In a decision that would haunt or glorify him, he gave a curt nod. One shot, McElroy. Make it the goddamn best of your life. If you're wrong, you're on latrine duty for the rest of the war. If you're right, he didn't finish. He just waved him off. 6. Anatomy of a miracle. Physics, ballistics, and defying the odds. McElroy moved to the forward knoll, a slight rise offering a sliver of a view through a natural break in the trees. The wind was variable, 3 to 7 miles per hour from the west-northwest. He lay prone, wrapping his sling tightly around his support arm for a rock-steady, hasty sling position. He packed snow around the rifle's fore-end to minimize mirage from barrel heat. He slowed his breathing, his heart rate dropping as it had 1,000 times before a shot at a deer. He peered through the M84 scope. The farmhouse was a gray smudge. He wasn't aiming at a man or even a specific window. He was aiming at a memory. The precise visual memory of the glint he'd seen hours before, now translated into a mental holdover point in a mist. He accounted for the drop. He aimed approximately 30 feet above the roofline. He judged the wind. He aimed roughly 2 mil dots, about 20 feet at that range to the left. He factored in the cold, dense air, a slight reduction in his elevation. His finger took up the slack on the trigger. The world shrank to the circle of his scope, the feel of the stock against his cheek, and the gentle pressure on his finger. There was no war, no fear, no captain's doubt, only the perfect alignment of man, tool, and target. He exhaled halfway, held, and the recoil slammed into his shoulder. The report echoed through the forest. At the CP, Captain O'Malley heard it and instinctively looked at his watch. 14-17 hours. The journey of the .30-06 bullet lasted just over 2 seconds. In that time, it arced high above the treetops, a parabolic curve of polished lead and copper, spinning furiously for stability, its path constantly nudged by the microcurrents of air. It began its terminal drop, descending from its apex toward the farmhouse. In the east window of the farmhouse, Unteroffizier Klaus Richter, a seasoned gunner, was scanning the tree line. His MG-42, on its tripod, was fed with a fresh 250-round belt. The gun's feed tray, a robust piece of stamped steel, was open, awaiting the first cartridge. The bullet did not hit Richter. It did not need to. It struck the MG-42 itself, specifically the junction of the feed tray and the receiver housing. At that velocity and range, it was a sledgehammer blow. The precision-crafted mechanism was catastrophically deformed, jamming irreparably. The impact sent shards of metal flying, wounding Richter and his loader. But the true effect was instantaneous and cascading. The violent, unexpected strike from an impossible direction caused panic. The German squad leader in the farmhouse, thinking they were under direct assault from a new, unseen American position, screamed into his field telephone to the flanking bunkers. Achtung! Direct Bestius! Alle in Deckung! Attention! Direct fire! Everyone take cover! In that moment of shock and confusion, the gunners in the flanking bunkers, hearing the panic and the sudden silence of their primary gun, instinctively ducked, ceasing fire. The interlocked system, reliant on communication and confidence, fractured. For 30 critical seconds, the entire complex fell silent. 7. The ripple of silence. Immediate aftermath and tactical triumph. On the American lines, the silence was deafening. The constant, dreaded buzzsaw cacophony from the farmhouse sector stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by distant small arms fire elsewhere. Captain O'Malley, listening on the field phone to his forward observers, heard the stunned report. Sir, the farmhouse, the machine guns, they've stopped. All of them. Seizing the moment, the kind of moment infantry commanders dream of, O'Malley didn't wait for confirmation. He ordered his reserve platoon to advance under covering smoke. The men moved across the clearing, expecting the tearing rip of MG-42 fire at any second. It never came. By the time the German bunkers began to tentatively re-engage, the American platoon was already assaulting the flanks with grenades and Browning automatic rifles, bars. The strong point, its nervous system severed by a single bullet, was overrun within the hour. The tactical gain was significant. It opened a vital corridor, allowed the evacuation of dozens of wounded stranded in no man's land, and collapsed the German defensive line in that company's sector, enabling an advance of nearly a mile, a monumental achievement in the Hurtgen. More importantly, it provided a priceless commodity, a victory, a story of hope in a forest of despair. When debriefed, McElroy was characteristically terse. "I hit the gun, sir." Ballistics analysis later suggested why the single shot had such a profound effect. A damaged machine gun in a fortified position is worse than no machine gun at all. It blocks the firing port, demoralizes the crew, and creates a focal point of vulnerability. McElroy, the farm boy, had instinctively chosen not to kill a man, but to kill the most critical tool at the most critical time. 8. The Ghost's Legacy, Sniper Doctrine, and the Birth of a Legend. News of the shot spread through the 28th Division and beyond, morphing with each telling. It became the shot that took out a whole company, or the mile-long kill. While exaggerated, its impact on U.S. military thinking was real and tangible. Prior to Hurtgen, the U.S. Army had a lukewarm, even distrustful, view of snipers, often associating them with a lack of infantrymen's fighting spirit. The European theater lacked the dedicated sniper training programs of the Pacific. McElroy's demonstrated that a single, well-placed shot could achieve more than a company-sized assault with far less risk. He proved the sniper was not just a killer, but a force multiplier and a system disruptor. In the war's final months, the Army began to formalize sniper training more seriously, studying not just marksmanship, but the fieldcraft, observation, and psychological warfare McElroy embodied. The legend of the Ghost of the Hurtgen became a training anecdote, emphasizing the sniper's role in shaping the battlefield far beyond his own position. He was the catalyst for a shift in perception, from seeing the sniper as a lone wolf to recognizing him as a sophisticated intelligence-gathering and precision strike asset. 9. Beyond the scope, the psychological war and the sniper's burden. McElroy's story is not just one of technical triumph, but of profound psychological complexity. The label delusional from his captain, however briefly considered, speaks to the immense pressure and isolation of the sniper. Operating alone for days, hyper-alert in a world of lethal threats, the line between supreme focus and mental breakdown was thin. McElroy's calm was his armor, but it also set him apart, making him seem alien even to his own side. Furthermore, the shot highlights the psychological warfare intrinsic to sniping. The German strongpoint was neutralized not just by a broken machine gun, but by the idea it created. The Americans have a weapon or a soldier who can reach out and touch us anywhere, at any time. This sniper fear eroded enemy morale, forced them to keep their heads down, and slowed their operations. McElroy, likely without intending to, became a weapon of terror more effective than any mortar barrage. The burden of this role, knowing the fear he instilled, the lives he ended with clinical detachment, was a weight carried silently, a ghost's burden long after the war. 10. Epilogue, the fading echo, recognition, memory, and historical veracity. John McElroy survived the war. He returned to Missouri, shunned the spotlight, and rarely spoke of his service. He received no Medal of Honor for the shot. Such singular acts, while legendary within units, were often lost in the paperwork of larger battles. He was awarded a Silver Star for gallantry in action during the Hurtgen campaign, with the citation vaguely mentioning numerous critical eliminations of enemy assets. He died in 1995, a quiet man. His story lived on in regimental histories, sniper training manuals, and the growing community of military history enthusiasts. The veracity of every detail, the exact distance, the number of guns, the captain's words, is, like all war stories, subject to the fog of memory and myth. Post-war analysis of German records confirms the ferocity of the defense at that farmhouse complex and a localized collapse of their line on that date, corroborating the core of the legend. Whether it was precisely 1,000 yards, 8 guns, or one miraculously placed bullet is, in a way, secondary. The story of Jack McElroy endures because it encapsulates a fundamental human truth: that in the midst of industrialized, chaotic slaughter, the skill, courage, and judgment of a single individual can still alter the course of events. It is a tale of perception defying reality, of patience overpowering chaos, and of how a man who was almost dismissed as seeing ghosts became one himself. A ghost whose single, echoing shot still resonates through the annals of military history as a testament to the impossible made real.